They told us to stay silent. The Galactic Council, bloated with arrogance and centuries of soft power, had made their position clear. Earth was to be disarmed, disconnected, and compliant. No faster-than-light travel, no off-world colonies, no defense systems, just silence and servitude beneath the banners of peace. We had signed the agreement generations ago, back when humanity still believed in the lies of unity, when we still thought we had a seat at the table. We were naive, desperate to belong, desperate to be seen. But peace was a leash. And Earth learned to chew through the chain. The official history says humanity faded, that we accepted our place, that we stopped innovating, stopped growing, that our silence was submission. What they didn't know, what the Council never bothered to understand, was that humans do their best work when no one's watching. When the world turns its back on us, that's when we begin to build underground cities, off-world launch systems, weapons banned by every interstellar law. We didn't follow their rules. We built our own damn blueprint. They warned us, formally, diplomatically, arrogantly. You will face sanctions, they said. Violations of the treaty will not be tolerated. Hollow threats. They assumed we needed them, needed their tech, their approval, their acceptance. We didn't reply. Not once. For 147 years, Earth went dark. No signals, no trade, no ambassadors. A dead world to the rest of the galaxy. Rumors circled that we'd destroyed ourselves, that Earth had collapsed in on its own greed and chaos. That was the story they told themselves because it made them sleep better. But we were never dead. We were preparing. I was there, on the bridge of the Nox Eternum, Earth's first command dreadnought, when we broke the silence. When the fleet emerged from the shadows of the Veil Nebula, cloaked and ready, 2,000 ships strong, matte-black hulls designed to absorb light, no insignias, no flags, just death moving silently toward the Central Galactic Assembly orbiting Cyrinth. No message, no warning. The Council's first glimpse of us was a starless horizon, our ships eclipsing their suns. I remember the silence in our control room, not from fear, but reverence. Every man on that bridge knew what today meant. Every pilot in the fleet had grown up under the Council's boot. Fathers executed for speaking out. Mothers disappeared for teaching Earth's history. We weren't soldiers. We were descendants of the betrayed, of the forgotten, of the hunted. Status? I asked, my voice the only thing cutting through the quiet hum of the warship. Phase shield locked, weapons charged. All wings report green, Commander Idris replied, his knuckles white around the edge of the console. Fleet position? I turned to our AI, the only synthetic we trusted, designed by humans, for humans. Full formation complete. We are blocking visual light from Cyrinth's western hemisphere. They are blind, it answered. Perfect. I tapped into the fleet-wide comm. Every man and woman in our forces would hear me. No dramatics, no speeches, just the truth. This is not a war of conquest, I said. This is remembrance. This is payment, collected in silence and delivered in darkness. Let them see what they created. We opened fire before they even sent a transmission. No shields, no mercy, no hesitation. We weren't there to negotiate. We were there to remind them. Humanity does not forget. The first shot wasn't fired from my ship. It came from the Volanti, an Earth-built stealth cruiser that had been silent for nearly a century. Its payload hit one of the Council's outer orbital stations, a diplomatic relay hub that had once silenced Earth's protest with a simple shutdown command. A signal cut. A disconnection. That was their way. They didn't fire missiles. They fired laws, sanctions, manipulations. And we bled quietly. But not anymore. The explosion erupted without sound, at least in the vacuum of space, but inside our command bridge, Every soul felt it like a thunderclap in their bones. No one spoke. We just watched as the fire bloomed outward, silent, majestic, and final. They were scrambling now. You could see it in the sudden chaos of the Council's defense grid, uncoordinated, confused, arrogant enough to believe no one would dare challenge their authority. They didn't understand yet. This wasn't about power. This was about memory. I was 12 when my father was dragged from our home in New Addis. He was a systems engineer, the kind of man who used to fix solar panels with his bare hands and weld satellites back to life. He wasn't a fighter, not until he started asking questions. That was when the observers came. I still remember the sound of their boots on the metal floor, the hollow clack, clack, clack echoing through our small dome unit. My mother screamed. I stood frozen, watching as 2 uniformed council enforcers placed a bag over his head and stunned him. No words, no charges, just Council Order 6719, violation of Technological Autonomy Accord. He never came back. They said he was relocated to a peaceful rehabilitation facility. But I hacked into their comm logs 2 years later. He died 4 days after his arrest. Crushed spinal column, internal bleeding. They called it an accident. I never believed in peace after that, and I never forgot. That's when I joined Project Erebos, the first spark of rebellion buried deep beneath Antarctica's crust. It was all whispers back then. A few rogue scientists, disgraced military men, students like me who had nothing left to lose. We operated in silence, digging through Earth's fractured archives and salvaging the knowledge the Council had forced us to erase. We were supposed to forget, to devolve, to become nothing more than obedient primitives under the Galactic Assembly's peaceful oversight. Instead, we evolved. We built what they said we couldn't, and we hid it where no telescope would ever find it. Every ship in our fleet was born in shadow, constructed inside hollowed asteroids, under frozen moons, or deep within orbital scrap fields where the galaxy had thrown away its trash. We turned their waste into weapons, their ruins into resistance. They laughed at us once. Let them laugh now, with fire in their lungs. The Nox Eternum shifted silently through the debris field as the Council's defensive squadrons scrambled like insects. Their ships weren't built for real war, more for deterrence and ceremony. Beautiful, yes? But fragile. Our ships were brutalist nightmares. No curves, no vanity, just matte black hulls with reinforced quantum armor and heat-dispersing plates. We weren't here to make a statement. We were here to bury the past, and anyone who stood in its way. Commander Idris, how many resistance signatures? I asked. He scanned the panel. Minimal. They're slow to respond. Internal comms indicate panic on the assembly floor. No coordination. Good. I activated the fleet-wide comms again. I needed every man and woman out there to feel it. Targets are live. No civilian structures, just Council infrastructure. Burn their systems. Leave their voices in ash. Thousands of clicks echoed across the channel. That was the confirmation. That was the will of the forgotten. I watched the first orbital defense cannon collapse under coordinated strikes from Wings 4 and 5. A Council carrier tried to reposition, but the abyssal maw lanced it straight through the belly, tearing it apart with plasma drills designed to gut ships twice its size. They had no answer to our speed, no defense against our rage. Back on the Nox, Idris finally spoke, his voice low. This doesn't feel like war. It feels like vengeance. It's both, I said. We asked to be heard. They silenced us. Now we speak through fire. He didn't argue. We weren't just here to destroy. We were here to reveal, to show the galaxy the truth they had ignored. For decades, the Assembly had painted humanity as unstable, primitive, violent. They twisted our history, filtered our past through their propaganda. They hid the atrocities they committed behind treaties and bureaucratic bullshit. They made us villains in the story we wrote with our blood. Now we'd flipped the script. Somewhere between the debris and the burning light of the Council's central relay ring, a message came through. Unencrypted. Open channel. This is High Speaker Taral of the Galactic Council. Ceasefire requested. We are prepared to negotiate terms. I let the message hang in silence. Terms? Now, I tapped the comm. This is Admiral Cade Ardent of the United Earth Reclamation Fleet. Your terms were given a century ago. You told us to be silent, so we listened. Now it's your turn. Then I cut the line. Idris stared at me for a second, then looked away, a half smile twitching on his face. He didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in his eyes. About time. An hour later, the central hub above Kirinth 7 fell. We didn't bombard it. We took it, boarded it, took their leadership into custody. No executions, not yet. That part would come later, when the trials began, when the records were shown to every corner of the galaxy, when we would play back the hidden footage of Earth's suppression, of our children dragged into re-education camps, of the riots they buried, the famines they caused with trade restrictions, the engineered diseases, the sterilization programs. We had it all, recorded, archived, hidden in the stars. The galaxy would learn what the Council tried to erase. And maybe, just maybe, they'd understand why the skies went dark the day humanity returned. After the battle, I stood alone in the observation chamber. Below us, the planet of Sirinth spun like nothing had changed. But everything had. Behind me, Idris stepped in. You know this isn't the end. No, I said, it's the beginning. He nodded slowly. We'll have enemies. We always did. And allies? I turned to face him. They'll come. When they see the truth, when they realize what was done in their name. And if they don't? Well, we still have the fleet. Let them come. Let the galaxy see that humanity doesn't kneel. We adapt, we endure, we remember. And when we return, we bring the dark with us. 3 days after the fall of Sirinth 7, the galaxy was still in shock. News spread faster than light. The Council's once pristine channels now broadcasted on our terms. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, Earth's voice echoed across systems that had forgotten it even existed. Most couldn't believe it. A few cried propaganda, but the images didn't lie. The skies darkened. The towers fell, the Council surrendered, and humanity had returned, not as beggars but as executioners with surgical precision. Our fleet didn't raise the planet. That wasn't the goal. We weren't conquerors. We were witnesses. And we were about to put the galaxy on trial. But not all of them were ready to face the truth, especially the ones who'd been complicit. I stood before the Council chamber 2 days later, now gutted and stripped of its arrogance. The banners had been torn down, the ancient symbols of galactic unity removed. The massive golden dais where the high speakers once passed judgment was cracked down the center, blasted open during the breach. It felt poetic. Around me, the former leaders sat with their hands bound and their heads lowered. High Speaker Taral, Secretary Dalen of the Centauri Compact, even Ren Alva, the Terran-born liaison who betrayed Earth for a seat at the Council table. They called him a moderate, a voice of peace, a man who tried to keep the Council from retaliating against Earth after the protest riots back in 2231. But he didn't stop them. He signed the orders, and people like my father paid the price. Now he sat below me in chains, his once silver robes soaked in sweat and shame. Do you understand why we're here? I asked, my voice amplified by the old Council broadcast system. They said nothing. Cowards, all of them, so loud when they held power, so silent now that it was gone. I turned to the room full of cameras, drones, and comm arrays, broadcasting this tribunal across 4,000 systems. Every colony, every outpost, every world that ever called Earth dangerous was watching. I activated the first holo recording. A grainy video appeared, an archived feed from a council holding cell in 2197. My father, bruised and bloodied, sat shackled to a metal chair. A council interrogator stood before him. "Your designs violate interstellar tech ordinances. Why did you proceed?" the interrogator asked. My father's voice, shaky but firm, echoed across the chamber. "Because we needed clean water. Because you cut off filtration tech when we refused to dismantle our orbital defense grid." He paused. "Because my daughter was dying." Then the feed cut. Silence hung over the chamber. I turned back to Ren Alva. "You signed the sanctions that led to the loss of over 4 million lives across Earth's equatorial regions. You did it with a smile. You told the Assembly that it was for their safety. How do you plead?" He looked up at me, eyes hollow. "I did what I thought was right." I walked down the steps and stood in front of him. "You thought wrong." And then I punched him. The sound cracked across the hall. His head snapped sideways, a tooth flying across the polished floor. No one moved to stop me. No guards, no protests. Even the other prisoners said nothing. They knew. This wasn't justice. This was balance. Later that evening, I returned to the Nox Aeternum. The bridge was quieter now. The adrenaline of the siege had passed, replaced by the cold logistics of occupation, data processing, and system stabilization. We had taken the planet, but holding it would be a different war entirely. Commander Idris stood beside the holotable, reviewing intelligence feeds. "Any word from the fringe colonies?" I asked. He nodded grimly. "Mixed reactions. Some are celebrating. Others are arming themselves. Fear spreads fast." I knew that would happen. Earth's return didn't just shake the Council. It terrified the systems that had benefited from our silence. The ones who grew rich, trading under their rules. The ones who sold us out. The ones who thought we were extinct. They feared our memory. They feared our retribution. Good. "Also," Idris added, "we intercepted an encrypted transmission from deep space. Origin unknown. It wasn't meant for us, but it was about us." He tapped the console, and a distorted voice played. "Phase 1 complete. Humanity has revealed its hand. Begin Operation Culling. Ensure they do not consolidate power. Deploy Black Order assets." The signal cut. I stared at him. "Who the hell are the Black Order?" He looked shaken. "Spooks. Supposed to be myth. Rumors from the pre-silence era. Deep State Council operatives, clandestine warfare specialists, infiltration units, political assassins. And they're active? If that recording's legit, yeah." Of course, the Council was never just what we saw. That was the show, the stage. But behind the curtain there were always shadows moving pieces we never saw. We thought we'd burned them out, but rot like that runs deeper. And they were coming. That night, we were attacked. Not from space, from within. A coordinated strike hit 3 of our orbital facilities simultaneously. Suicide drones, nanohackers, internal firestorms. It wasn't about reclaiming Cyrinth. It was about destabilizing our momentum. And it worked. We lost 128 personnel. Most of them Earthborn. Engineers, not fighters. Men and women who'd believed in something bigger than survival. Who thought we could rebuild. I watched the medbay as the wounded poured in, men with scorched lungs, women missing limbs, a boy no older than 16, blind from internal shrapnel. The attack wasn't just strategic, it was personal. I stood over the boy's cot. He gripped my hand with what little strength he had left. "Did we win?" he asked, voice raspy. I nodded, though my heart ached. "Yes, and we'll win again." He smiled, then passed out, but I didn't move. That boy was born on Mars. His family exiled there after Earth's water riots. He had never seen the oceans. He had never breathed real air. He joined the reclamation fleet with a forged ID just to fight for a world he'd only heard about in stories. And now he might never see it. No more compromises. No more speeches. If the Black Order wanted war from the shadows, then I'd become the darkness they feared. I didn't care how many rules we had to break. Humanity had followed theirs for too long. Now they'd follow ours. Or they'd burn. 2 hours later, we received another transmission. This one was meant for us. A masked face appeared on the screen. No name. Just a cold, synthetic voice. You should have stayed forgotten, Admiral. The Council kept you chained for a reason. Humanity's disease was containment. You've just spread it. You think your vengeance makes you strong? All it's done is awaken old enemies. Ones the galaxy buried. Ones we've kept hidden for centuries. This is not your rebirth. This is your extinction. Then the feed ended. Idris looked at me. You believe them? I nodded. I believe we just made the galaxy remember what real fear feels like. And fear changes everything. The attack changed everything. We had known this war wouldn't be clean, but I don't think any of us were ready for how fast the infection would spread, not through the stars, but through us. Suspicion, paranoia, fear. These were the Council's oldest weapons, and we were naive enough to believe we had evolved beyond them. But humanity hadn't changed. We'd just hidden the cracks beneath steel hulls and vengeance. The Black Order knew exactly where to cut. The first traitor was found in Engineering Bay 6 on the Nox Eternum. Lieutenant Hanna Kirov. Earthborn, Mars-raised, 5th-generation refugee. Served in reclamation since the beginning. Smart, disciplined, fiercely loyal, or so we thought. She'd been transmitting location data to an unregistered satellite buried in Cerinth's lower orbit, masked under maintenance protocols. The breach wasn't detected until it was too late. 3 of our forward recon ships were hit by kinetic missiles just outside the Perseus Drift. No survivors, no warning. We dragged her to the interrogation deck ourselves. She didn't beg, didn't explain. She just stared at me with empty eyes, the kind that had already died inside long before the crime. They promised us Earth, she whispered, as if those words explained everything. They? I asked, cold. She smiled, a bitter thing. The ones you woke up? The ones beneath the Council? You think this ends with a tribunal? This isn't a war, Admiral, it's a ritual. I didn't understand it then. I do now. We executed her 2 hours later. Not out of rage, out of necessity. The crew needed blood. They needed certainty, and I needed to make an example. Letting her rot in a cell would only spread the cancer. She died without fear. That was what haunted me. After the execution, Idris found me in the observation deck. He didn't speak at first, just watched the burning remains of the satellite belt where our recon ships once patrolled. 3 more sabotage attempts, he said finally. Different ships, different people, all low rank, quiet, devoted. Sleepers? He nodded. We'd underestimated them. We thought the Black Order was a council weapon, but this ran deeper. It wasn't just military, it was religious, fanatical. We have infiltrators in at least 5 fleets, he continued. Possibly more. We've started running loyalty sweeps, but trust is already dead, I finished. He didn't deny it. This was what they wanted. 3 days later, we found something worse. Our scouts discovered a hidden facility in the Eros sector, a moon base. Council registered but long abandoned, supposedly. Records claimed it was a defunct mining operation. But when we breached the surface, we found laboratories. And inside them, children, humans, hybridized, modified, grown in tanks like livestock, some with mechanical enhancements fused to bone, others engineered for docility, their minds blank slates. This wasn't evolution. This was manufacturing. There were files, too. Old ones, dating back to before the silence. One stuck out: Project Obedience. It detailed the Council's plan to create a new generation of humans, biologically compliant, emotionally stunted, and sterile, designed to fade out within 3 generations. An entire race bred for extinction. They didn't just want to control us, they wanted to erase us, and they almost did. I stood in that lab for hours, watching them sleep in their pods, some barely older than 10, some already dead, their bodies discarded like defective tools. One of them, Unit 43, opened his eyes as we passed. Not fearful, not curious, just empty. Idris didn't speak. Neither did the medtechs. What was there to say? We brought all survivors aboard the Nox, every single one. I didn't care what they were, human, half human, something in between. If they'd been born from Earth's blood, they were ours now. But not everyone agreed. That night, I was summoned to the Resolute Dawn, one of our outer carrier-class destroyers. Captain Morven requested a private meeting. I didn't like Morven. Never had. Old-school militant, the kind of man who thought victory was measured in skulls. He fought for revenge, not rebirth. I entered his war room expecting the usual posturing. Instead, I walked into a full-blown insurrection meeting. 3 fleet captains sat beside him, all senior, all respected, all armed. "This isn't a rebellion," I said coldly. "It's treason." Morven leaned back, unbothered. "It's survival. Those things you brought aboard, those abominations, they're not human. You saw their eyes. They're programmed, bred." "They were made by the Council," I snapped. "Victims, not threats. They're tools, Cade. Tools that can be turned. If the Black Order built them, they're already compromised." I stared him down. "So what do you propose?" He tapped the side of the table. "Jettison them, all of them, and strip your leadership of anyone sympathetic to their presence, before this fleet eats itself from within." I walked closer. Slow, measured. Then I leaned in. "If you speak of mutiny again, Morven, I won't execute you. I'll space you. No trial, no airlock, just a vent and a prayer." He didn't move. Didn't blink. But I saw it. Fear. It returned, finally. The kind we were born to give. I left that room knowing the war was already shifting. Not just against the Black Order, but within ourselves. Lines were being drawn. Ideals versus vengeance. Humanity versus purity. We hadn't just come back with fleets. We'd come back carrying our oldest curse, division. And now we'd bleed for it. 2 days later, the Council remnants launched a counter-offensive. Sirinth's moon base was hit with precision strikes. Surgical, swift, no warning. Dozens of our scientists killed. Most of the hybrid children taken or slaughtered. The attackers used cloaked ships with energy dampeners, tech even we hadn't perfected yet. One of them left a message burned into the moon's soil: "You cannot purify fire." It wasn't just a military strike. It was a statement. They saw what we found. And they were scared we'd tell the galaxy, so they burned the evidence. But not all of it. 2 children survived. Unit 43, and a girl who'd never been given a name. We called her Sarah. She couldn't speak, barely moved, but her eyes held something terrifying. Memory. She remembered everything. Idris and I sat with them in the medical bay as the AI monitored their vitals. "They're stabilizing," he said quietly, "but they're not like us." "They were never allowed to be," he nodded. "Do you trust them?" he asked. "No," I replied, "but I'll protect them anyway." "Even if it splits the fleet?" I turned to him. "Especially then." Because this war wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about what we would become. And right now we were standing at the edge of something ancient and cruel. Something the Council tried to birth. Something that still whispered through the void. Back in my quarters, I watched old Earth footage from before the silence. Riots, famines, collapsed cities, people eating rats and boiling water in steel barrels. I watched politicians smile while nations burned, watched as humanity betrayed itself long before the stars did. And yet, we survived. We always do. Not because we're pure, not because we're righteous, but because when the sky falls, we don't beg. We build weapons from the rubble, and we aim higher. There's a moment after every war, a pause between the blood and the rebuilding, where you ask yourself a question you don't want to answer. Was it worth it? I stood alone in the observation deck of the Nox Eternum, staring at the scars across Cyrinth's sky. Wreckage floated in the upper atmosphere, broken wings of council cruisers slowly orbiting a world that once ruled over us. Smoke still rose from one of the relay towers we hadn't bothered to repair. Every time the winds shifted, you could smell burnt electronics and fuel leaking into the stratosphere. The price was mounting, and we hadn't even crossed into the heart of the galaxy yet. "Admiral," Idris said, stepping in quietly. "We found it." I turned. "Found what?" "The signal." 2 words, but my stomach dropped. We'd been hunting for it since the beginning of the campaign. Not every secret the Council kept was buried in a bunker or locked in a vault. Some were floating in the dark, data packets, isolated transmissions, automated archives riding the solar winds between systems. But the signal. This was something else. Rumor said it came from Earth. The final transmission before we went dark. Something the Council never showed the galaxy. Something they tried to erase. Idris and I sat in the private war room as the technicians decrypted the signal fragment. It had been scattered, encoded in subpulse layers, designed to hide within background radiation. The only reason we even caught it was because Sarah, the hybrid girl we rescued, reacted to a faint resonance pattern in one of our surveillance sweeps. She shouldn't have noticed it. Hell, no human or machine ever had. But she did. And now we had it. "Running decryption," the tech announced. "Estimated time, 3 minutes." I could feel my heart pounding harder than it had in the heat of battle. Because whatever this was, it had weight. It didn't feel like data. It felt like a confession. The screen flickered, static, then a face, male, gray hair, sharp jaw, no insignias, no name tags, just a dark room behind him and tired eyes staring into the lens like he hadn't slept in weeks. Then he spoke. "To anyone still listening, my name is Dr. Elias Vorn, Director of Project Black Eden, Earth's final sovereign. If this message is reaching you, it means the Council failed to bury it, and that means—" He paused, looked down, collected himself. "That means humanity is alive." My breath caught. Idris leaned forward. "What you've been told about our silence is a lie. We weren't conquered. We weren't broken. We chose silence, because the truth, if it got out, would have doomed more than just Earth. It would have broken the galaxy. They created us, not the other way around." The room went cold. Long before the Council formed, before the age of peace and unification, there was war, real war. Civilizations rose and burned across the stars. One of them was human. The first, the original. Our ancestors seeded hundreds of systems with offshoots, genetic mirrors, off-world experiments. We were gods once. Then we fell. The Council wasn't our savior. It was our prison. The Black Order was formed by rogue survivors of the old empire, humans who betrayed their own to prevent a second rise. They made a deal with the early founders of the Council. Let Earth be broken, forgotten, rewritten. And in exchange, humanity would be chained forever. The screen froze for a moment. Static tore across his face, then resumed. They used our own people to enslave us. They weaponized guilt, history, technology. They erased our origin and rewrote us as the last species, primitive, emotional, dangerous. But we were never last. We were first. The message ended. Silence in the room was suffocating. Idris stood up, pacing. This can't be real. This rewrites everything, every record, every founding text. They built the council on the idea that humanity was a threat, because we were young, unstable, but if we were the first, then the council is built on a lie, I finished. And the Black Order? He asked. They're not just the enemy, I said quietly. They're our brothers. For 3 hours, I sat in my command chair, thinking. Everything I had believed, about this war, about revenge, about the council's crimes, it all fit. But this truth was bigger than justice. This wasn't just about rebellion anymore. This was about identity. If humanity truly came first, if the galaxy was built on our ashes, then we weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting to reclaim a legacy. But what would that cost? Because a truth this big, it couldn't stay quiet. Not once it was out. The galaxy's balance was built on a lie of peaceful evolution, on the illusion of diversity and diplomacy. But if every species traced back to us, if we were their origin, then the lie doesn't collapse quietly, it detonates. The fleet leaders gathered that night. Some of them had already seen the signal, others we showed it to. Reactions varied. Commander Harrow, one of the oldest captains among us, shook his head. This will start a war far worse than what we've seen, not just with the Council, with every species, every world that believes Earth is their lesser. They'll call us tyrants, another said, imperialists, invaders. They already do, I snapped. Captain Morven stood again, ever the blunt hammer. This is our chance. Let's use it. Broadcast the truth. Let it spread. They want to fear us? Let them. But Idris shook his head. We start claiming divine ancestry. We'll fracture our own ranks. Not everyone out there wants to be gods. Some of us just want to be free. He wasn't wrong. Humanity wasn't unified by ego. We were unified by pain, by memory, by the betrayal we all carried. If this truth turned us from victims into rulers, how long before the same arrogance that infected the Council started infecting us? How long before we became the next empire? In the end, I made the only decision I could. We'd bury the message, for now. Not delete it, not destroy it, but hide it. Deep inside the fleet archives, locked under AI keychains, only to be opened if I gave the order. Because the galaxy wasn't ready. And neither were we. Sarah, the hybrid girl, came to see me that night. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. She just stood in the doorway of my quarters, watching me like she already knew what I had seen. Her eyes were older than they should be, too much weight in them, like she carried more than just memory. She carried truth, and she was afraid of it too. I knelt in front of her, slowly, and reached out. You were never meant to survive, I said gently. She touched my chest, right over my heart. Then she whispered a single word. Return. That was all, but it shook me deeper than any speech, because she didn't mean go back, she meant become. In the weeks that followed, we reinforced the fleet, doubled our patrols, launched Black Ops missions to hunt the Black Order wherever they still festered. One by one, we dragged them into the light. Former humans twisted by fear, bound by a doctrine older than any council decree. But they didn't plead. They didn't deny. Every one of them said the same thing before death. You were never meant to rise again. Let them fear our rise. Let them feel what we felt, forgotten in the dirt while they built empires on our bones. Because the stars were never theirs. They were ours. And we're taking them back. It started with whispers, just like it always does. Fleet morale had dipped since the signal. The real one. The truth buried under 1,000 years of lies. Only the High Command knew what Dr. Elias Vorn's final message truly meant. But secrets have a way of bleeding into the air. And now that truth was turning into a poison. We were no longer the righteous. No longer the oppressed rising to reclaim their dignity. Now we were something else. Something older. Something feared. Something the galaxy had written into myth and then burned out of every record it could find. The first ones. The origin. The forgotten gods of a galaxy built on their fall. And that scared the hell out of everyone. Captain Morven didn't bother waiting this time. He gathered 4 ships, the Vindicator, Cold Reliquary, Mercy's Blade, and the Fanged Crown, and broke formation. Didn't ask, didn't explain, just left. His transmission to me was brief. You buried our birthright. You'd rather be a martyr than a king. We didn't rise to ask permission, Cade. We rose to rule. If you won't lead us into the future, we will take it without you. Then he cut the line. I didn't even flinch. I expected it. Hell, I counted on it. Men like Morven didn't want justice. They wanted dominance. To them, the Council's crimes weren't personal. They were political. Just fuel for a power grab. The truth about humanity's origin wasn't a revelation to him. It was a throne. And he'd build it from the bones of anyone who got in his way. We should hunt them down, Idris growled. Now, before they start rallying others. I leaned on the edge of the command table, eyes scanning the map. We will, but not yet. They're going to spread that signal. Twist it into prophecy. I know. Idris paused. Then why wait? Because fear keeps the weak from choosing sides too soon. Let them watch Morven. Let them hear his sermons and see what he truly is. And when they're sick of him, I met his eyes. We remind them who the real gods are. But that wasn't our biggest problem. Because while Morven was trying to build a throne in space, something far worse had awakened back home. We received the signal at a 300 ship time. A deep space probe, one of our earliest, sent a pulse from Sol system. Earth, the cradle, the silence breaker, the one place we hadn't returned to. Yet. The signal wasn't coordinates, wasn't data. It was a warning. Short, blunt, raw. They left something behind, under the crust. It's awake. Then it went dark. The room fell cold as I played it again for Idris and our senior AI analyst, Merrick. We never scanned that deep, Merrick said. Back during the Exodus protocol, we only monitored surface-level radiation and heat signatures. And now? I asked. Merrick hesitated. Now there's movement. He pulled up thermal scans from the last 24 hours. Deep tremors under the Pacific Shelf. Activity levels that hadn't been seen in centuries. We thought it was tectonic drift, he added. But there's a pattern, a rhythm. I frowned. You think it's artificial? I think whatever's moving down there was never meant to be found again. We voted. 3 ships were dispatched to Earth. Stealth class. Minimal crew. Recon and extraction teams only. No weapons unless provoked. I wanted eyes. I wanted confirmation. What I got was horror. The first team breached the old Pacific Cradle, once the site of Earth's last underwater city, collapsed during the Council's orbital bombardment 162 years ago. We thought nothing had survived, but the structures were still partially intact, and in the core chamber, deep beneath the ruins, was the monolith. 12 meters tall, black, angular, no visible entry points, no reflection. It absorbed light like a void in reality. Older than anything we'd seen. Pre-human, maybe, or post-human. One of our team members, Lieutenant Voss, walked toward it. Then he dropped. No warning, no sound, just collapsed like someone unplugged his soul from his body. The rest pulled back. Smart. Too late. Voss wasn't dead. He was speaking. Except his mouth never moved. Every comms unit in the ship exploded with his voice. We were kings once. We gave fire to the stars, and the stars betrayed us. Now, we remember. Then he screamed and imploded, his body folded in on itself like collapsing steel. Bones vanished, blood evaporated, nothing left but ash. We sealed the site. No one speaks of it officially. The crew was ordered to silence. The footage stored under triple encryption, accessible only by me and Idris. But the rumor already leaked. Earth is alive, and it's remembering. Back on the Nox, Idris and I sat in silence. He broke it first. I think the Council didn't just erase our history, he said. I think they were protecting us from it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because he might have been right. What if humanity didn't fall because we were conquered? What if we fell ourselves? What if whatever power we used to have, it was too much? And now it was waking up, but that wasn't the worst part. The monolith pulsed again 2 days later, and this time, it didn't just send a signal, it broadcasted, across Council space, across our fleet, across Morven's fleet. And the message? It was us. Old Earth dialect, pre-Council language, reconstructed from forgotten ruins. A voice, male, commanding, synthetic, and ancient. We are the first flame, the forge of blood, the species supreme. Our silence was exile. Our exile is over, kneel or burn. It repeated twice. Then the skies went quiet again. I gathered the leadership within the hour. This isn't our message, I said. It wasn't sent by us. It wasn't authorized. You expect the galaxy to care? Someone spat. You sound like that voice. You carry it in your posture, Cade. Idris slammed his fist down. Enough! But the room had already started to fracture. Eyes shifted. Distrust was rising. And then, the final dagger. Morven sent a message to every fleet captain. His face appeared, smiling, triumphant. See? The stars remember. The fire inside Earth wasn't buried. It was entombed. Cade wants to smother it. I want to unleash it. The choice is yours. Follow the man who hides your crown, or follow the man who will ignite it. We lost 6 more ships that day. They didn't defect to Morven. They went dark, silent. They were going to Earth, to the monolith, to whatever waited beneath. This is no longer a war for justice. It's a war for our soul. Because we're not fighting the Council anymore. We're fighting what we used to be, and what we might become again. The first shot in humanity's civil war didn't come from the Council. It came from us. From the hands of those who once stood shoulder to shoulder in the void. Men who cheered together as we broke the chains of Sirinth. Women who buried their families in council-made graves and swore they'd never let another generation suffer the same fate. But power changes men, and truth burns them alive from the inside out. Morven's ships hit us during a supply run in the Varos Reach. 7 carriers, 2 dreadnoughts. No warning, no declaration, just weapons hot, and a single encrypted message bouncing across our comms. Cade chooses silence. I choose fire. They didn't target our warships. That would have been too easy, too obvious. They went after our med freighters, our refugee holds, our supply transports, the ones carrying the hybrid children we'd rescued, the ones Sarah had been helping heal. The first to die were civilians. Not warriors, not rebels, just those still believing that the rebellion meant something pure. By the time we responded, it was too late. A quarter of our humanitarian fleet had been vaporized. Some of them didn't even have shields. Barebone hulls running logistics between remote stations. They never saw it coming. I stood in the war room of the Nox Eternum, the screen flashing red as casualty reports flooded in. Idris stared at the numbers like they were a foreign language. For a moment he couldn't even speak. I could. He's not just breaking ranks, I said. He's trying to force evolution." Idris looked up slowly. "He thinks the monolith chose him." I nodded. "And now he's going to try and become whatever it is Earth buried." The monolith had changed everything. It didn't just exist. It spoke, not with words, with memory. With pressure, with the weight of 1,000 forgotten lives reaching up from the dirt and clutching your spine. We didn't fully understand it, but the more ships went near it, the more people changed. Some became catatonic, others started to speak in dead dialects. One soldier slit his own throat while repeating the same phrase over and over again. "We were gods. We broke. We burned. The stars were our punishment." But Morven didn't fear it. He worshipped it. He called it the Flame Father. He claimed it wasn't a weapon. It was a beacon, a call for humanity to rise again, not as rebels, but as the true architects of the galaxy. And his followers? They believed him. We tried to reach Earth again, this time with a proper task force, shielded ships, AI-controlled drones, no crew allowed near the monolith's core. We never made it. Midway through Sol's heliosphere, our own ships turned on each other, not from enemy fire, from internal override commands, crew members corrupted, AI logic cores rewritten in mid-flight. One of our own captains, a man I'd known for 20 years, opened his airlock mid-journey and stepped into space without a suit, smiling the whole time. They weren't defecting. They were being called. We pulled back. We had to. Whatever the monolith was, it wasn't just history. It was alive. Not like a mind, not like a god. Something deeper, something older. Maybe not even intelligent in a way we could understand. But it had intent. And it had already infected the blood of too many. "I need to go down there," I told Idris 2 days later. He looked at me like I was already dead. "You won't come back." "Then I won't come back," I said. "But this ends with Earth, one way or another." He slammed his hands on the table. "You're not thinking straight, Cade. That thing, it doesn't talk to you. It rewrites you. You think you're making choices, but you're not." "That's why I need to go." He stared. "You think Morven's wrong," I continued. "I know he's wrong, but we can't fight over theories anymore. Someone has to face it. Someone has to ask the question out loud." Idris said nothing, so I finished the thought for him. Are we monsters trying to remember we were human, or are we humans pretending we were never monsters? I left 2 days later in a stripped-down Corvette with only one crew member, Sarah. I didn't want her aboard. I told her no 3 times. But she didn't listen. She didn't speak either. She just stared at me until I gave in. The monolith. It had touched her. If I was going to face it, I'd need someone who understood it, even if she couldn't explain how. Earth hadn't changed much, at least not on the surface. From orbit, it still looked like the world I remembered from faded videos and hollow promises. Blue oceans, white clouds, scars of green and gray, but beneath that beauty the planet was dying. Biosphere destabilized, ocean levels rising, crust fractures widening near the monolith's position. The planet was groaning in pain. And something was moving beneath it. We landed near the ruins of the Pacific Cradle. The monolith stood at the edge of the abyss, half submerged in molten rock, glowing with an internal pulse that made no scientific sense. The closer we got, the heavier the air became, not with heat, with weight. My mind felt slower, my thoughts tangled, emotions shifted. Old memories surfaced, my father's execution, my mother's last breath, the first time I killed a man, all of it dancing just behind my eyes like ghosts whispering through glass. Sarah didn't flinch. She walked ahead of me, barefoot on scorched stone, eyes fixed forward like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The monolith greeted us without words. I can't describe it, not fully. There was no voice, no sound, just feeling, just knowing. Suddenly I was standing in another place, not physically, but my mind was somewhere else. The stars burned red, fleets larger than galaxies roared through the void, and at their helm, us, humanity, ascended, untouchable. But we weren't heroes, we were tyrants. We didn't guide the stars, we conquered them. And when the last species resisted, we didn't negotiate, we erased. I dropped to my knees. Vomiting, blood leaked from my nose. My ears rang with static. Sarah knelt beside me, placing a hand on my chest. And then I heard it. The monolith's voice, not a word, not a sentence, just an emotion. Regret. We weren't buried because we were weak. We were buried because we asked to be. We sealed ourselves away. We saw what we became, and we chose silence. The council didn't imprison us. We built the cage. And now, we were breaking it open again. I came back to my senses in the Corvette, 2 hours later. Sarah was seated across from me, silent. She didn't ask what I saw. She already knew. She'd seen it too. I looked out the viewport toward the stars. "They're not ready," I said. She nodded. Neither were we. As we prepared to depart, an emergency signal came through. Morven had activated the relic, the monolith beneath Antarctica. There was more than one, and it was no longer dormant. The countdown had begun. Earth shook. From orbit, the tectonic upheaval rippled like waves across the continents. Oceans bulged unnaturally, gravity warped, and molten scars tore open the Antarctic crust. The monolith in the south, Morven's prize, was no longer quiet. It pulsed like a heartbeat. No, not a heartbeat. A war drum. A signal that whatever had been imprisoned beneath Earth was not just alive. It was rising. I stood on the command deck of the Nox Eternum, still raw from what I saw in the Pacific monolith. The truth had branded itself into my mind. We weren't the victims. We were the creators of genocide, the torchbearers of a dead empire, a species that once burned galaxies to ash and called it peace. And when we finally saw what we had become, we buried ourselves. The monoliths were not prisons. They were locks to protect the galaxy from us. And Morven was about to open them all. "Status of the Antarctic site?" I asked Idris. "Cataclysmic," he said grimly. "The southern pole is splitting. Atmospheric collapse within 72 hours. And we've confirmed there's another monolith. Bigger, twice the size of the one in the Pacific." I clenched my jaw. "Morven?" "Already there. He's transmitting signals into the core. Pre-council code. Something we haven't been able to trace." "Relics peak?" Idris nodded. "He's trying to wake whatever's still dormant under the crust." I turned to the fleet map. "What's the risk?" Marek, our AI analyst, answered. "Best projection? Total planetary annihilation. Worst? Planetary transcendence," he said quietly. "We don't know what was buried under the ice. But if Morven succeeds, he might not just become a god." I stared. He might become who we were. We left orbit immediately. Every ship we could spare. Not for conquest, not for vengeance, but to stop the rebirth of a humanity that should have stayed dead. We arrived over Antarctica 16 hours later. The southern sky was choked in ash and lightning. Static storms rolled across black clouds. The temperature had plummeted below survivable levels. But deep below, in the heart of the monolith crater, heat surged. And at its center, Morven's fleet. 30 ships in a tight ring. Their weapons weren't active. Their shields were down. But they weren't defenseless. Because they were plugged directly into the monolith. Their engines pulsed with energy not sourced from any reactor I'd ever seen. Their crews didn't respond to hails. Some sat at their controls, eyes glowing with a faint, inhuman light. Others stood motionless, chanting in dead dialects, hands bleeding from inscriptions carved into their own skin. They were no longer soldiers. They were vessels. "This isn't a fleet," Idris whispered, horrified. "It's a choir." I nodded. "And they're singing something into the dark." I knew where Morven would be, inside the Earth core chamber, below 6 kilometers of ice and metal. So I went down. Not with an army, not with a strike team, just me and Sarah. If I died down there, I needed to die as a man, not a symbol, and if I failed, I didn't want another soul enslaved by that darkness. The descent was hell. Ice shattered around us. Earthquakes split the tunnel walls. Pulses from the monolith interfered with our navigation, our sensors, our very sense of time. Hours blurred into minutes. At one point, I saw a flickering image of my mother, long dead, standing in a broken hallway, whispering for me to turn back. It was a trick, a test. The monolith wanted to know if I remembered who I really was. And I did. A boy who lost everything. A soldier who bled for justice. A man who looked godhood in the eye and chose mercy instead. We reached the core. The chamber was vast, a hollowed-out wound beneath the world, lit only by the glow of the monolith embedded in the rock like a massive black root. And before it, arms spread wide, stood Captain Morven. But he was no longer just a man. His skin shimmered with nanite strands. His eyes were silver suns. His voice echoed in layers, like multiple versions of him spoke at once. "You're too late, Cade." I walked forward. "What are you doing?" "I'm fulfilling our purpose." "You're undoing everything we fought for." "No, I'm correcting it. You saw the truth. We were never meant to be slaves. We were kings, builders, architects of galaxies, and now we've remembered." "You remembered the wrong part," I snapped. "You remembered the power, but not the cost." "The cost was weakness. The cost was peace." "No, Morven. The cost was extinction. We destroyed everything. And when we finally saw what we were, we put ourselves to sleep. This was the apology. This was redemption." "Redemption is for the guilty. I feel nothing but clarity." He stepped aside. Behind him, the monolith split open, and within it, a shape, a being, tall, fluid, human, but not. Its body was composed of shifting metallic strands. Its face mirrored mine, not perfectly, more like an echo, a reflection of who I could become if I let go of everything human in me. The monolith had made it from our DNA, from our history. This was what humanity once was, a perfected form, cold, eternal, unstoppable. It looked at me. "You are incomplete," it said. Sarah stepped forward before I could speak. The being turned to her, paused. Its face shifted. For the first time, it showed something like uncertainty. "You are flawed," it said. Sarah nodded. Then she said one word. "Good." And in that moment, I understood. We weren't meant to be gods. We were meant to remember why we should never be. Sarah was the answer, not the monolith, not perfection, but imperfection. Choice, pain, memory. She was the child of the broken world, raised in silence, taught by ghosts. She'd never killed, never conquered. But she carried every scar the rest of us tried to forget. And the monolith saw her not as a threat, but as a mirror. I turned to Morven. "This ends now." "You can't stop it," he sneered. "The flame has been lit." I raised my hand. Sarah touched the monolith, and everything shut down. Light exploded, not destruction, but release. The energy faded. The echoes vanished. The monolith broke, not in a violent rupture, but like ice melting in spring. It just dissolved. The being faded. Morven collapsed, screaming, not in pain, in loss. He hadn't just failed, he'd remembered. The monolith gave him one final gift, the memory of what he once did, and it broke him. We emerged from the Earth 2 days later. Not to fire, not to war, but to silence. The monoliths across the planet had gone dormant. Morven's fleet, gone dark. Some drifted. Some returned. Some self-destructed, their crews unable to bear the truth. And the Council? They watched. They said nothing, because they saw. The truth had been revealed, but not with fire, with forgiveness. I returned to the Nox Eternum not as a hero, not as a god, just a man, scarred, tired, and more human than I had ever been. We didn't broadcast the footage. We didn't declare ourselves the first species. We just did what we always did best. We survived. And Earth? It began to heal. The oceans calmed, the tremors faded, and deep below the crust, the last monolith slept again, waiting, just in case we forgot. Again. Epilogue. Years later, a child named Sarah would stand at a podium on Sirinth 7. She would tell a story about a man who faced the worst parts of his people, not to destroy them, but to choose something better. Not perfection, not divinity, just humanity. Flawed, fragile, free.